I stared at the positive pregnancy test in my hand, the two pink lines screaming their truth into the silent bathroom, while downstairs, the sounds of my husband's birthday party, my carefully planned surprise for his 40th, swelled with laughter and clinking glasses. He was down there, surrounded by 50 of our closest friends and family, holding court, while my entire world had just silently split in two. I was pregnant, and the man cheering over his new vintage Rolex downstairs had scheduled a vasectomy 6 months ago. The cold of the porcelain sink seeped into my palms as I braced myself. This wasn't joy. This was a physics problem, a biological impossibility. Unless the laws of the universe had rewritten themselves, this child was not my husband's. If you've ever felt the ground vanish beneath your feet, if you've ever held a truth so terrifying it feels like a secret bomb, you're not alone. Subscribe to the channel. Stay with me. My story isn't over, and neither is yours. My name is Clara Evans. I'm a landscape architect, or I was before I became a full-time ghost in my own marriage. The test in my hand wasn't a cheap one. It was the digital kind, the one that spells it out in cold, clinical letters. Pregnant. 3+. Weeks, it estimated. I counted back in my head, a frantic, sickening calculation. 6 weeks ago. The firm's retreat in Santa Barbara, the rain-slicked terrace, a bottle of bourbon shared with my business partner, Marcus, after a brutal client presentation, the blurry, grief-stricken collision after we got the news that our biggest project had been greenlit, a victory that felt hollow because my husband, Daniel, had forgotten to call, again. The memory was fragmented, shameful, a hot pulse of whiskey and loneliness and professional solidarity that tipped into something else. One time. A catastrophic, unforgivable one time. And now this irrevocable consequence. I heard Daniel's booming laugh cut through the music. "She's the mastermind," he was saying, no doubt deflecting praise for the party onto me, the way he did with all domestic labor. "I just show up." The crowd ate it up. Charming Daniel, successful Daniel. Daniel, who had sat across from me at dinner 3 months ago and said, "A baby would tie us down, Clara. We're finally free. Let's just enjoy our lives." Daniel, who had patted my hand after the procedure, calling it responsible. Daniel, who hadn't touched me with anything resembling passion in over a year. I hid the test in the very back of my vanity, behind a tangle of old hair tools. I splashed water on my face, the shock hardening into a kind of cold, hyper-focused clarity. I had to get through this party. I had to be the perfect hostess. I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do. Descending the stairs felt like walking into a different life. Our Seattle home, a modern box of glass and steel overlooking Lake Washington, was filled with people Daniel wanted to impress. His tech bro friends, their sleek, sharp-elbowed wives, a few venture capitalists, my sister Liza throwing me a worried glance from the kitchen. Daniel spotted me, his arms snaking around the shoulders of his COO, a woman named Anya who laughed a little too loudly at everything he said. "There she is," he called, his smile broad, practiced. "Where'd you disappear to?" "Just fixing a napkin emergency," I said, my voice miraculously steady. The caterer used the wrong linen weight. He rolled his eyes playfully for the crowd. "See, master of details. I'd be lost without her." He said it like I was a useful app, a life management platform. I floated through the next 2 hours, a smiling automaton refilling bowls of truffle-infused popcorn, directing the bartender, laughing at jokes I didn't hear. All the while, the words screamed in my head. Pregnant, not his. Pregnant, not his. I found Liza by the floating fireplace. "You look pale," she murmured, handing me a glass of sparkling water. "Just tired. This was a lot. She studied me, her older sister's sensors pinging. He didn't even know about it, did he? The party. He loves surprises, I said, the automatic defense a sour taste in my mouth. He loves being the center of attention, there's a difference. She squeezed my arm. Come over for lunch tomorrow, just us. I nodded, a lump in my throat. I couldn't tell her, not yet. The shame was too vast, a tar pit I'd fallen into. The party wound down. The last guest, a VC named Fitz, clapped Daniel on the back. Incredible wife you've got, Danny. Holds down the fort so you can conquer the world, huh? Daniel grinned, pulling me to his side in a possessive squeeze that felt like a vice. She's the bedrock, right, honey? I smiled up at him. Someone has to be. Later, in the stark silence of our cleaned-up kitchen, Daniel poured himself a final whiskey. He examined the Rolex on his wrist, the one I saved for secretly for 8 months, skimming from the grocery budget, taking on small freelance planting designs. Great party, Clara. Really top-notch. It was a performance review. Thank you. Fitz was impressed. Thinks you could run events. He took a sip. Might be a good side hustle for you, now that the firm's, Now that the firm's what? I'd scaled back my role at the landscape architecture partnership I'd founded with Marcus after Daniel's last big talk about needing more support at home for his crunch time. My career, once my defining passion, had been quietly downgraded to a side hustle. I have a career, Daniel, I said. He waved a hand. You know what I mean. Something flexible. He finished the whiskey. I'm beat. Coming up? In a bit. I'll lock up. He kissed my forehead, a dry paternal peck. Don't stay up too late. You look exhausted. The moment he disappeared upstairs, I retrieved the test. I stared at it under the harsh kitchen lights. Pregnant. I needed proof, not of the pregnancy, but of the timeline, of my own sanity. I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling as I logged into my personal calendar. I navigated back 6 weeks. Santa Barbara. The retreat. I'd marked it, Retreat with Marcus, Seacrest Resort, Client Pitch. Then my period tracker app synced to the same calendar, my last period. A flood of cold certainty. The dates aligned perfectly with Santa Barbara. They were impossible with Daniel's timeline. The vasectomy had been in January. This was March. I opened a private browser. I researched paternity tests. I needed one I could do secretly before I made a single decision. There was a non-invasive prenatal paternity test that could be done after 7 weeks. It required a blood draw from me and a cheek swab from the potential father. Getting Daniel's DNA without his knowledge felt like a descent into a spy novel, but the alternative, confessing my infidelity based on a circumstantial timeline, was unthinkable. He would destroy me, not angrily, but coldly, systematically. He would take the moral high ground and dismantle my life with calm, legal precision. I found a reputable lab in Bellevue that offered discreet services. I booked an appointment for 2 weeks from then under a fake name, Clara Smith. The confirmation email hit my inbox. Appointment confirmation, Clara Smith, Bellevue Genetics Lab, 9 a.m., March 28th. Please bring photo ID. Test cost, $1,895. I noted the date, the cost, the brutal specificity of it. This was my first secret, my first step into a shadow life. The next morning, I went to lunch at Liza's cozy, chaotic craftsman in Ballard. Her twin 6-year-olds were painting at the kitchen table, and the smell of tomato soup filled the air. Real life. Okay, spill, she said, setting down 2 mugs of tea. You were a ghost last night. The urge to tell her everything was a physical pressure behind my ribs, but I couldn't, not until I knew for sure. I'm just tired of being the bedrock, I said, which was true. Daniel's the Icarus of tech startups, Liza said bluntly. All wax wings and arrogance, and you're the one holding the net waiting for him to fall. It's not a partnership, Clara. It's a custodial arrangement. Her words cut too close to the bone. It's complicated. His work is high pressure. So was yours. You built a beautiful business, and you let him talk you into shrinking it. I didn't let him. We made a decision together. Even as I said it, I heard the hollowness. Our discussions were always Daniel presenting a logical case, his higher earning potential, the volatility of my field, the need for home front stability, until my desires seemed frivolous, selfish. Right, Liza said, not believing me for a second. Well, if you ever want to unmake that decision, I'm here. The girls would love Aunt Clara back. I left feeling more alone than ever. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in surreal normalcy. I met with a client about a rooftop garden, my mind drifting to the life growing inside me, a secret garden of my own catastrophe. I cooked Daniel's preferred meals, high protein, low carb. I listened to him talk about funding rounds and board politics. I played my part. And I planned the theft. Getting Daniel's DNA was both simpler and more horrifying than I imagined. He was fastidious about his appearance. Every morning he used an expensive electric razor, cleaning it meticulously over the bathroom trash can. I started taking out the bathroom trash myself, a new act of domestic diligence. On March 27th, the morning before my lab appointment, I saw my chance. A few short, dark hairs clung to the rim of the sink after his shave. My heart hammering, I used a clean tissue to pick them up, sealing them in a small Ziploc bag. I felt like a criminal. I was a criminal. The next morning, I told Daniel I had a dentist appointment. I drove across the lake to Bellevue, the baggie with the damning contents in my purse. The lab was cold and sterile. The phlebotomist took my blood efficiently. I handed over the baggie with the hairs. "The other sample," I said, my face flaming. "It's fine," she said, her voice devoid of judgment. "We just need the follicles. We'll extract what we can." The results would take 5 to 7 business days. I walked back out into the spring sunshine, feeling scraped raw. I drove to a park by the lake and sat in my car, shaking. I was now a woman waiting for a scientific verdict to tell her who the father of her child was. There was no lower point. The waiting was torture. Every phone notification made me jump. Daniel was in a strangely good mood. His startup had secured a new round of funding. He came home one evening, ebullient. "We're celebrating," he announced, pulling a bottle of Dom Perignon from a bag. "This calls for the good stuff." My stomach lurched. "I'm not really feeling champagne." "Nonsense, 1 glass." He popped the cork with a triumphant bang. As he poured, he said, "Fitz is throwing a yacht party on Saturday for the key players and their wives. It's a big deal. Networking at highest level. You'll need something stunning. Go buy a new dress. My treat." It was an order wrapped in generosity. "That sounds intense." "It's an opportunity, Clara." His tone sharpened slightly. "This is the big league. We need to look the part. A unified front." He handed me a flute. "To the future." I took the smallest sip possible, the bubbles feeling like acid. "To the future," I echoed, the words ash in my mouth. On day 6 of the wait, a Saturday, Daniel was at the office for a critical sprint. I was supposed to be dress shopping. Instead, I was in my home office pretending to work on a planting schematic when the email arrived. "Bellevue Genetics Lab, your results are ready." My breath stopped. I clicked the link. It asked for a password and a unique report ID from my receipt. My hands were so slick with sweat I mistyped twice. Finally, the PDF opened. It was stark. A cover page with my alias, pages of technical explanations, and then the summary. Conclusion. Based on the analysis of fetal cell-free DNA from the maternal blood sample and comparative analysis of DNA from the submitted putative father sample, the alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the fetus. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. There it was, in black and white, scientific, absolute, and utterly damning. Daniel was not the father. The air left the room. The world narrowed to the pixels on the screen, spelling out my ruin. Marcus was the father, a man I respected, a friend, but did not love, a man married to someone else. A single night of weakness had detonated my life. I don't know how long I sat there. The shock was a physical blow. Then, a different feeling began to seep through the cracks of my panic. A terrible, undeniable sliver of relief. Daniel was not the father. This child, this unexpected, life-altering being, was not tied to him, not tied to his cold calculations, his performative affection, his transactional view of family. This child was a product of a moment of human frailty, yes, but also perhaps of a deeper, unacknowledged starvation for genuine connection. The sound of the garage door opening jolted me into action. I slammed the laptop shut, as if the truth could seep out. Daniel came in, dumping his keys on the entry table. "Find a dress?" he called. "Not yet," I said, walking out, my legs miraculously steady. "I got caught up on work." He frowned. "The firm can wait. The yacht party can't. This is important, Clara. Fitz's wife, Celia, is a certain type. You need to impress her." "What type is that?" I asked, a strange calm settling over me. "The type that matters," he said, as if it were obvious. "She runs a nonprofit that's a PR goldmine. Connections there could be huge. I need you to be charming, engaging, make her like you. So my job is to be a charming accessory for your business deal." He sighed, the long-suffering sigh. "Don't be reductive, it's partnership. You support my goals, I provide this." He gestured around our expensive, empty house. "It's a symbiosis." Symbiosis, a biological term for two organisms living in close association. Often one benefits while the other is harmed. Commensalism, parasitism. "Right," I said softly. "Symbiosis." I bought a dress, a sleek navy blue sheath that cost more than my first car. I wore it to the yacht party on Saturday, a smiling mannequin on Daniel's arm. I charmed Celia Fitz. I talked about native perennials and sustainable urban spaces. She was actually interested, which seemed to both please and unsettle Daniel. He kept steering the conversation back to his company's eco-friendly data solutions. On the deck, under a string of fairy lights, with the Seattle skyline glittering across the dark water, Daniel put his arm around me. "You're doing great," he murmured into my hair. "Just like I knew you would." A switch flipped inside me. The confirmation of the test, the silent knowledge I carried, had changed the composition of my fear. It was still there, but it had alloyed with a ferocious, protective anger. For myself, for the unknown life inside me. I turned to him, smiling my perfect hostess smile. "You know, you're right, Daniel. This is a beautiful life you provide." I let my gaze sweep over the yacht, the glittering water. It's so perfectly curated, like a museum exhibit. The successful life, a installation. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to actually live in it instead of just being part of the display. His smile tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, my tone light, airy. I placed a hand gently on his forearm. "Just thinking out loud. It's a lovely party. You should go chat with Fitz. I saw him looking at you." He searched my face for sarcasm, found only serene attentiveness, and nodded, mollified. "Don't wander off too far." That small moment, that subtle, coded jab he didn't even fully understand, was my first taste of reclaiming a shred of power. It was my minor revenge, a tiny crack in the perfect facade I'd been maintaining. It happened at roughly the 15% mark of this nightmare, and it gave me just enough oxygen to keep planning my escape. Because an escape was now the only option. I was pregnant with another man's child. The truth would come out. The only question was how and on whose terms. I began to move with a new, secret purpose. I scheduled a confidential appointment with my own doctor using my maiden name. An ultrasound confirmed a healthy pregnancy, measuring exactly 8 weeks. I saw the flickering heartbeat, a tiny, relentless star in the grainy black and white. A profound, complicated love slammed into me, alongside the terror. This was my child, mine. I needed a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer yet, but someone who could advise me on my rights, on how to protect myself before the storm hit. I found one, a fierce woman named Evelyn Shaw, who specialized in high-net-worth, complex family law. Our initial consultation was in a nondescript office building in Pioneer Square. I told her everything: the emotional neglect, the financial control, the vasectomy, the infidelity, the pregnancy, the paternity test. She listened without flinching, taking precise notes. "You're in an extremely vulnerable position," she said finally. "Adultery can impact divorce proceedings in this state, especially regarding spousal support. His vasectomy and the timeline will be central. He will paint you as the villain. You need to be prepared for that." "I know. The first thing we do is secure your own financial snapshot. Do you have access to all joint accounts, tax returns, investment statements?" "I have viewing access. He handles everything." "Start documenting, take screenshots, gather every statement you can. Do you have any separate assets?" "A small IRA from before the marriage, some personal savings, maybe $15,000. "That's a start. Do not move any joint money yet. Do not leave the marital home, and do not tell him about the pregnancy or the paternity until we have a strategy. The goal is to put you in the strongest possible position before disclosure." I left with a list of tasks. It felt good. Actionable steps. I wasn't just a victim of circumstances. I was a general, preparing for a war I didn't start but was determined to survive. Gathering the documents was like assembling a dossier on my own imprisonment. I saw the patterns clearly for the first time. Daniel's salary, which was substantial, flowed into accounts he controlled. A generous allowance was auto-deposited into a joint checking account for household expenses, which I managed. My own freelance income, which had dwindled, went into that same account. All major assets, the house, the investment portfolio, even his lucrative stock options, were in his name or in trusts I had only a vague understanding of. I was a tenant in my own life with a generous landlord. One evening, while Daniel was in the shower, I used his laptop, which was never password protected because he had nothing to hide. I quickly searched for recent statements for our main investment account. I found the PDF, and my blood ran cold. The account, valued at just over $2 million, was titled the Daniel P. Evans Revocable Living Trust. The beneficiary designation was not me. It was split between his sister and a scholarship fund at his alma mater. A note in the file memo, dated just 4 months ago, read, "Updated per discussion with estate planner, simpler structure." He had disinherited me, without a word. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, the date and time visible in the corner. The chill in my heart solidified into ice. This was no longer just about emotional neglect. This was financial warfare. He had been planning for a future without me long before my infidelity. I had to tell Marcus. It was the only decent, horrible thing left to do. I asked him to meet me at the Arboretum, a neutral, public place. He looked worried when he saw my face. We walked along a path lined with budding cherry trees. "Clara, what's going on? You've been distant for weeks." I stopped walking, bracing myself against the trunk of a massive cedar. "I'm pregnant, Marcus." His face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, confusion, dawning horror. Daniel had a... No, the dates don't work. Daniel had a vasectomy. I forced myself to look directly at him. It was Santa Barbara. All the color drained from his face. He leaned against a nearby bench as if his legs wouldn't hold him. "Oh God, Clara." "I've had a prenatal paternity test. Daniel is excluded." I handed him a sealed envelope with a copy of the results summary, his name handwritten on it. "You should know. I'm not asking for anything. This is my responsibility. I just thought you had the right to know." He took the envelope, his hands shaking. "Does Daniel?" "No, and he can't, not yet. I'm in a dangerous position with him." Marcus nodded slowly, his legal mind catching up. "He'll go nuclear." "Yes. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm figuring it out. I have a lawyer." He was silent for a long time, staring at the unopened envelope. "Lydia and we've been having problems, but this..." He looked at me, his eyes full of a profound sadness. "I'm so sorry, Clara, for everything, for that night, for this mess." "It took 2 of us," I said quietly. "I'm not blameless." "What do you need from me?" he asked, and the question felt genuine, not performative. "Right now, just your discretion, and time to decide what you want to do about being involved. I won't ask for anything financial, I just need to handle Daniel first." He finally met my gaze. "However you need me, I'm here. It's a lot, but I'm here." It was more than I'd expected, a fragile thread of alliance. Weeks passed. My pregnancy remained my secret. I was nauseous, exhausted, hiding it with claims of a lingering virus. Daniel grew increasingly impatient with my laziness. The final straw came the night before my first official prenatal appointment, the one I would attend alone. We were at a dinner party at Anya, the COO's pristine condo. The conversation turned to children. Someone asked Daniel laughingly if we'd ever considered it. Daniel chuckled, swirling his wine. "We're the cool aunt and uncle. We like our freedom too much. Plus, the world is overpopulated. It's the responsible choice." He reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Right, honey?" Every eye at the table turned to me. I felt the weight of my secret, the life inside me, like a beacon. I smiled. "Actually, I think bringing a kind, thoughtful person into the world is one of the most responsible things you can do, if you want to." The table went awkwardly quiet. Daniel's smile froze. "Well, lucky for the planet we're on the same page," he said, his voice a warning. Later, in the car, he exploded. "What was that, Clara? You made it sound like I'm some child-hating monster." "I just offered a different perspective. Is that not allowed?" "Not when it makes me look bad in front of my team. We agreed on this. No kids. It was a mutual decision." "Was it?" The words were out before I could stop them. "Or was it your decision and I just learned to agree with you?" He stared at me, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights, looking truly baffled. "Where is this coming from? Is this about your biological clock? Because we talked about this. A baby would ruin everything we've built." "What have we built, Daniel?" My voice was quiet, deadly calm. "A showcase home? A network of useful contacts? What exactly is the everything that's too precious to ruin?" He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and cold, a tone I only heard him use with failing employees. "You need to get a grip, Clara. You're emotional and irrational. Maybe you should go back to therapy, figure out why you're so dissatisfied with a life most women would kill for." That was it, the final clean cut. He wasn't my husband in that moment. He was my dismissive CEO, and I was a problem to be managed. The next day, at my prenatal appointment, I heard the heartbeat again, strong and fast. I made a decision. I couldn't live in this lie anymore. I would tell him, but on my terms, in a place where I had some measure of control. I asked Evelyn to initiate a formal separation agreement. We would present it to him alongside the truth. It was a preemptive strike. Evelyn drew up the papers. They requested a fair division of assets based on my contributions as a homemaker and business supporter, spousal support for a transitional period, and my separate property. They were fair, even generous to him, but I knew he would see them as an act of war. We scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday afternoon at Evelyn's office. I asked Daniel to meet me there, telling him it was a surprise joint financial planning session that Evelyn, a new advisor, was facilitating. He was annoyed, but agreed. Money always got his attention. He arrived in a sharp suit, clearly coming from work. He gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "This better be quick. I have a 4 p.m. Evelyn greeted us professionally, ushering us into a conference room. Daniel's eyes scanned the room, missing the usual financial planner paraphernalia. "So, what's this about?" he asked, taking a seat. Evelyn sat at the head of the table. "Mr. Evans, thank you for coming. Clara has retained me as her legal counsel." Daniel's head snapped toward me. "Counsel? For what?" "I'm filing for legal separation, Daniel," I said, my voice clear. I pushed the separation agreement across the table to him. He didn't touch it. He laughed, a short, disbelieving bark. "What? Are you serious? Because of a little argument last week? This is insane." "It's not about one argument. It's about our entire marriage. It's not a partnership. It hasn't been for a long time." He leaned forward, his charm evaporating, leaving cold steel. Clara, you are making a catastrophic mistake. You walk away from me, you walk away from everything. The house, the lifestyle, the security. You'll be a 40-year-old divorcee with a stalled career. Is that what you want?" His words were meant to terrify me, and a part of me was terrified, but a larger part was furious. I'd rather be alone in a studio apartment than lonely in a mansion with you. His eyes narrowed. "Fine, if this is how you want to play it, but you're not getting half of anything. You contributed nothing to my success. You were just the wife, a very expensive accessory." He turned to Evelyn. "I'll have my lawyers rip this to shreds." "That is your right," Evelyn said calmly. "However, Washington is a community property state. Clara is entitled to a fair share of assets accrued during the marriage, regardless of whose name is on the titles. Furthermore, her contributions to the home and your career are legally significant." Daniel stood up. "We'll see about that." He looked at me with pure contempt. "I thought you were smarter than this. I guess I was wrong." This was the moment, the point of no return. My hands were in my lap, clenched around the ultrasound photo in my pocket. "There's more, Daniel." He paused, his hand on the door handle. "I don't want to hear it." "You need to." I took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." Time stopped. He turned back slowly, his face a mask of utter comprehension that quickly morphed into dawning, horrific comprehension. "That's impossible." "I'm 12 weeks along." His mind worked, the calculator behind his eyes whirring. 12 weeks, 3 months, back to January, past his vasectomy. The color drained from his face, replaced with a mottled, furious red. "You whore." The word hung in the air, vile and final. "The child isn't yours," I stated, the fact he already knew. He took a step toward me, and for a second I thought he might strike me. Evelyn moved subtly between us. "Mr. Evans, I advise you to leave now. Any further discussion will be through counsel." He ignored her, his gaze locked on me, burning with hatred. All of it, the distractedness, the sickness, the attitude, it was this. You were cheating on me. You got yourself knocked up. He let out a bitter, choked laugh. "And you have the audacity to ask me for money? You are dead to me, Clara. Do you hear me? Dead. You will get nothing. I will spend every last dollar I have to make sure you end up in a gutter where you belong." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the framed diplomas on the wall rattled. I sat there, trembling, the adrenaline crashing through me. Evelyn put a hand on my shoulder. "That went about as expected. The hard part is over. Now we fight." And we fought. What followed was a legal siege. Daniel's lawyers were pit bulls. They painted me as a gold-digging adulteress, using the pregnancy as their smoking gun. They subpoenaed Marcus, trying to prove a long-term affair to reduce my claim to spousal support. They froze the joint accounts. They sent intimidating letters. But Evelyn was a fortress. She countered with evidence of Daniel's financial control, the disinheritance from the trust, his emotional abandonment. She hired a forensic accountant who, through the documents I'd gathered, began to trace and value the community property Daniel had tried to hide. The stress was immense. I moved in with Liza, who welcomed me without a single "I told you so," just with open arms and a bed for her favorite sister and nibbling. Marcus and I had strained, careful conversations. He and Lydia were separating. He wanted to be involved in the baby's life, to provide support. It was a tangled, painful web, but he was trying to do the right thing. The lowest point came when Daniel's lawyers deposed me. For 6 hours, they asked invasive, humiliating questions about my marriage, my night with Marcus, my finances, my motives. They tried to make me break. I held on to the image of the ultrasound, the steady heartbeat. I held on to Liza's words, "You are not what he says you are." The turning point, the climax of this brutal war, was the mediation session ordered by the court. We were in another sterile conference room. Daniel, his lawyer, Evelyn, and me. Daniel looked at me like I was a stain. His lawyer started with a lowball offer, a one-time payment of $100,000 in exchange for signing away all rights to any other marital assets and no spousal support. It was an insult. Evelyn didn't blink. We reject that. Our offer is on the table. Our offer was for 40% of the liquidated marital estate, 2 years of spousal support, and my separate property. You forfeited any claim to generosity through your actions, Daniel spat, speaking directly to me, bypassing the lawyers. You betrayed me. You don't get to profit from it. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since that day in Evelyn's office. The anger was still there, but beneath it, I saw something else. A profound, petulant hurt. Not hurt over losing me, but hurt over his perfect narrative being destroyed. He was the victim in his story. This isn't about profit, Daniel, I said, my voice weary but steady. It's about survival, my survival and the survival of my child. You can hate me, that's your right, but the law exists for a reason. I contributed to our life for 15 years. I supported your career. I managed our home. That has value. You contributed a fantasy, he said, his voice dripping with venom. The fantasy of a happy home while you were fucking your business partner. The mediator cleared his throat. Let's keep this professional. Evelyn slid a new document across the table. It was the forensic accountant's preliminary report. It highlighted several large transfers Daniel had made over the past year to an offshore account, transfers that coincided with his trust updates. It suggested a deliberate attempt to dissipate marital assets. Daniel's lawyer paled slightly as he scanned it. Pursuing this in court, Evelyn said pleasantly, will mean full disclosure on these transfers. A judge will take a very dim view of hiding assets. It could result in sanctions, and my client could be awarding far more than we're asking for now. Not to mention the PR nightmare for your client's eco-friendly brand if his treatment of his wife becomes part of the public record. It was checkmate. Daniel's jaw worked. He understood numbers and risk. A long, tense silence filled the room. $250,000, one time, no support. $350,000 and 18 months of support at $15,000 a month. They haggled like it was a business deal, which to Daniel it was. Finally, we settled. A lump sum of $300,000, 12 months of spousal support at $12,000 a month, and I kept my IRA and personal savings. I waived any claim to his future stock options or the business. I got the Prius, he kept the house and the bulk of the investments. It was less than half of what was technically community property, but it was freedom money. It was a lifeline. I took it. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in October. I was 5 months pregnant, starting to show. I wore a loose dress to the courthouse. Daniel didn't look at me once. When the judge declared the marriage dissolved, I felt nothing but a vast, hollow relief. The epilogue began that day. I used part of the settlement as a down payment on a small, sunny cottage in West Seattle with a wild, neglected garden in the back. It needed work. It needed love. It was perfect. Marcus and I established an awkward but functional co-parenting relationship. He was present for the birth of our daughter, whom I named Sylvie. He provides financial support and takes her 2 weekends a month. There is no romance between us, only a shared, complicated love for this amazing little person we created. It's not a traditional family, but it's honest. Liza is my rock. Her twins adore their cousin. My garden became my therapy and my new business card. I started small, designing for friends, then neighbors. My business, Rooted Design, is slowly growing. It's not about conquering the world. It's about creating beauty, one sustainable, intentional space at a time. Daniel, I heard through the grapevine, married Anya, the COO, within a year. I imagine their life is a perfectly coordinated merger. I wish him no ill will. He is a chapter I finally closed. Tonight, as I write this, Sylvie is sleeping in the next room. The cottage is quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher. Outside, in my garden, the hydrangeas I planted last year are finally blooming in the moonlight, great frothy heads of blue and pink. I think back to that night in the bathroom, the 2 pink lines, the sound of laughter below. I thought I was holding a death sentence. I was actually holding a lifeline, a tiny, insistent demand that I stop being a ghost and start living. I learned that betrayal isn't always an affair. Sometimes it's the slow, quiet betrayal of self, the agreement to disappear for the comfort of a narrative that isn't yours. Walking away from that is the hardest, bravest thing you can do. My life is smaller now, it's messier. There are Legos on the floor and dirt under my fingernails, but it is mine. Every joyful, complicated, real inch of it. And for the first time since I was a young woman with a drafting table and big dreams, I am enough, just as I am. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the foundations up, if you've ever chosen a hard truth over a beautiful lie, I see you. Tell me your story in the comments below. You are not alone. And if my journey from a cold, silent dining room to this vibrant, messy cottage resonates with you, subscribe to the channel. Stay with me. There are more stories of courage waiting to be told, and I want you here for the next one.